entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
House to Home, presented by RE/MAX Diamond Realty.
Holiday, everybody. Of course, an integral part of any transaction involving property is the permitting process. So if you will permit us, we're going to talk to Liz and Bert Johnston, who are joining us now. Now, we had this conversation, guys, several weeks ago.
Right. We were on the air.
But it was incomplete. We didn't get to everything we want to talk about.
We interviewed the Lieutenant Governor about, he put together a task force, which Bert Johnston is the chairperson. So we interviewed him, and then we also interviewed Bert right when he was starting the committee process on reviewing the permits and seeing what the time frame was to do it and how to make improvements to that. So we interviewed Bert at that time, and now the work has been completed. So we had Bert again appear to tell us what the results were of that of his committee.
Okay, so Bert, now the meal has been cooked?
No, we've prepared the recipe.
Oh, there you
The
go.
recipe.
Okay, to use a food analogy.
Yeah.
So we're not even near the cooking phase yet.
Oh, not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. The idea was to get ideas of what can be done. We've taken some of the ideas. The thing that was interesting was we talked to the different agencies, and a lot of the ideas that we put together came from them. We asked them and said, if you had a chance to do this yourself, how would you do it? And they came up with ideas, and we just borrowed the ideas and put them together. So
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. And the thing
Good
is,
artists create, great artists steal.
well, the person that's closest to the problem knows more about the problem and has to live with the consequences.
Exactly.
So they're going to do some better work with that.
But remember what we talked about, that in coming up with solutions, it has to benefit the consumer. And sometimes the consumer is on the other side. Remember we talked about that sometimes the goal wasn't to serve the consumer sometimes. So I hope that the experience was to see what would help the consumer move through the process and get their building permit or whatever permits that they needed within a timely window.
Well, oftentimes the consumer is not the customer. Okay.
That's an interesting concept.
I know, we talked
and
about
the
that
thing is,
before.
And very confusing, I would say. So what do you mean by that precisely?
Well, the thing is, I had a discussion with the previous governor about having Guam more customer friendly, and I said it already is. It's just that, if the governor calls an agency, they drop whatever they will and take the call. If the senator calls...
Because he's the governor.
Because he's a customer. The senator calls, they drop everything, do everything. Tell Maria, take a message, because we're not the customer.
Okay, I see.
But hopefully in the process, it's changing, because that's not the proper way to look at it.
That's not what the customer sees. The customer expects something different. They think they're the customer, but in reality, a lot of times they're not the customer. And so what we want to do is try to refocus it toward to having them be recognized as a customer.
As the customer.
And part of it is, after every incident that somebody goes through, every experience that they go through, we wanted them to ask them, how was it? And get that feedback, and coming back and putting that into the customer training program.
As a means of improving the
Right.
process and further
Right.
streamlining it and making it more efficient.
Also, allowing everyday citizens to report things that are not right in this, as far as things that are not in compliance with the building codes. A process to bring that back in and then put it into customer training, so that there's a heavy emphasis on customer training. There's also a heavy emphasis on applicant training, because a lot of the complaints came from people that didn't fully understand the process. And part of that was that regulatory agencies understood the process but have never communicated that to the customer. For those people that were experienced in going through the process, they basically had no complaints. They knew exactly what to do. But most of the complaints came from people that didn't know about the process or expected something completely different. And so what we've asked the agencies are two things. Number one, give us your flow process. What are you doing? And map it out. Number two, give us the standards of measurement that you use to measure applications. From those two elements there, we can develop an education campaign to educate the applicant in the process so they fully understand what they're getting into before they even apply.
Which is what they've done, I would say, like at DMV for years. And they said,
Yeah.
if you don't show up in line, if you don't have all of your paperwork in order, you're going to have to redo it, go to the back of the line, and start all over.
But the thing is, you got to educate the customer, and you got to educate the staff that's serving them. And we had some complaints about, well, there's been poor customer service. But part of the poor customer service is to get good customer service, you got to be a good customer. And if your
Precisely.
if your expectations are different, you're going to be a bad customer, and it's going to come back to you.
But I think-
But how do you stop that? You
But
educate the cap.
That's one part of it, but I think sorry to interrupt you, but I think part of the complaint has been that they had to go to so many different agencies, and that would take, and before they could even get approvals, sometimes it takes a month or 2 months before you go through the process. So has that been addressed?
Yes, in 2 ways. Okay. Initially, back in '94, this concept of a one-stop center was created. And in '95, they created the one-stop center in Anigua. And that seemed to work for the most part. But slowly over time, it started to fall apart and they actually moved to DPW. But not all the agencies are there. Not all the agencies are there all the time. And our first suggestion is put it back in place. And there's been some pushback from the agency saying, that's too expensive. We can't afford that. We can't afford to have a person there all the time because there's not enough work for them to do stuff all the time. And our idea was, let's go ahead and force that because that's the fastest way we can do something. And then later on, gravitate toward a fully online application system. But for that to work, you're going to need a common platform that has to be developed. You're going to need some sort of funding source that will pay for that platform so that it's not unfunded, because when it's unfunded, it falls apart.
Well, of course, when we get to that point, then the whole thing
Right.
about, okay, if it's the governor on the phone, everybody drops everything. If it's the senator, and then if it's, Tan Maria Tunose, because a computer's not going to care. It's not going to differentiate.
Yeah. And the case about people dropping everything, look at the oversight hearings that the legislature does. The minute an oversight hearing is called, an agency head is notified, they drop everything to take care of the senators. Whereas if a customer walks in, I'm sorry, but you're not the customer right now. And that's not right.
So
Definitely. That isn't
the generations long pecking order of Guam, unfortunately.
Yeah. And we're not saying that, we're saying that it could be better. And so we need to recognize, first of all, who the customer is, and then make sure that we develop programs that are customer-centric.
Well, the customer is always job one for Liz and her staff. So we got about 15 seconds, Liz, so take us home with what we can do and where we have to be to get to that point.
Well, because part of this process was to improve and
yeah.
to create better timelines so that the consumer didn't have to wait. Again, addressing who is the consumer, I think it's got to be brought back to the community. If they're going to get a permit, it's got to go through a timely process so that it doesn't delay their construction, because if it delays their construction, costs continue to go up. And where we are now, construction costs are really high. I'd like to do a second interview to get more details.
Okay, excellent. So we will see you next time, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching.